Hello, 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 hello. Welcome, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Alex. I'll introduce myself shortly if you haven't seen me on any of the previous webinars. This is one of our monthly webinars. Actually got one in a couple of weeks for ChatGPT. Looking forward to that one. This one actually is an emergency webinar, and it's an emergency webinar because there's just so much interest in Azure Fabric, and that we needed to come out here and put out a little discussion around what we're seeing in the market, talk about Fabric, position it, and where it sits, and start that conversation and being part of it with you. I've sort of opened up a little bit here as to what I think the market for it is a little bit, and taking that self-service to the next level. But we'll get into that in the next few slides. Thanks so much for joining. I have Samantha Swain sitting there in Cronulla. She is manning or womaning or personing the chat. So feel free to put in any questions you have into the Q&A or the chat thing, and we'll come to that at the end. Feel free to put those questions in. This webinar is being recorded, so if you are seeing it and later on you'd like to have the link to share it to somebody else, let us know, though. Samantha will be sending this out to anybody who has signed up, though she edits it to make me look more appealing and take away any unfortunate wardrobe malfunctions as we go. So in this conversation, we're talking about what Fabric is, who it's aimed at, some of the terminology around it, so you can be cool and hip and understand what's happening out in the market and be able to converse, and talk about where Altus positions ourselves in the Fabric market. Samantha requires me to put a picture of myself up to introduce myself. Really, she used a picture here where I still had mostly non-grey hairs on top. And this is just so that each webinar I can mark off my progression of graying as we go. I have been around for a number of years in this space, been working with data since '99, and I love presenting. I feel like I'm one of the thought leaders at Altus. And what's important to me is making sure as a thought leader that I'm reinforcing to the market and what our thoughts are on some of the technologies and some of this rapidly evolving data space. So it's important to have these sessions, and thank you very much for attending. Fabric is one of the new solutions that's come out from Microsoft. It is, as you can see there on that intensely busy picture on the right-hand side, and I know it is intensely busy, I've put that there for a reason. It's one of the important cornerstones of what Microsoft's trying to do. Microsoft have a wealth of products. You can see that there on the right-hand side. There's so many individual components of Microsoft on the Azure software as a service platform. There's so much out there. What's important to do is navigate that, is to step back and have a look at some of those core components. We're looking at things like Microsoft 365, the Dynamics 365 trees, the Power Platform, and then the Microsoft Fabric. These are the core branches of the Microsoft Azure services. And as we drill down further into it, you can see Microsoft on the data side of things, Microsoft on the Azure Fabric are broken down into these experiences, which we'll talk about in a minute. These experiences are the different components that make up data and analytics in the Azure market space. It is all of those things with Power BI and real-time analytics and data warehousing, etc., etc. So this is an important part of that overall Microsoft offering. And so it's important for us to put that in perspective today so that you can understand where that is and start to position it for your organization. Microsoft and Azure has had a number of tools out there for quite a long time. They've got data factory tools there to move and manipulate data, moving into the Synapse data engineering space around moving, manipulating, condensing data, moving it around and manipulating it, moving into data warehousing and data lake resting spots, doing data science and real-time analytics. And then a lot of people in the Microsoft space, in the analytics space, know it from the Power BI angle. A lot of users are using Power BI as their interface into Azure. They use those workspaces to break up where the reporting and analytics is and be able to collaborate with other people. Fabric is really across that. It is the connective tissue that allows you to bring some of the workspaces and some of those ways of collaborating across the platform, across those different tools to make it end to end and have in one interface the ability to move and manipulate data, store it in the right way, and then do the right type of analytics and consumption on the other side. From within one space, taking the best components from each of those tools to make a very well supported collaborative environment. Really, I think, especially focused on the business side of things and really around trying to create a simplicity of integration and usage of the tool. That simplicity allows you to then be able to have everything in one spot instead of going off and talking to the data engineering who does things in one particular way and then going over to the report team who's using it there and building reports on data that they need to wait for certain data sets to come through to them before they can advance the reporting. Here, it's all there. It's easily, once you pick it up, it's every part of that componentry is familiar and easy to learn. So even easier if you use one of our training days to come and learn the tool and get hands-on with it. And it allows you to work with that unified data lake, which we'll talk about soon. My team here in New Zealand, and I'm sure in the other regions as well, have been very hands-on and getting deep into the trenches with Fabric. We want to know really what it's like. And that's one of the reasons you'd come to Altus and use us, is because we are starting to learn the lessons of Fabric, even though it's in pre-release, which I'll talk about soon, to really understand the pros and cons. So, what they like, and these are quotes from the team, is how everything's in one place. You just need to, switch between components that you want to use, experiences, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then you can refer data within that same workspace. Workspace is such an important component of Power BI, that collaborative angle and putting things into the right workspace. That is now permutated through to the other tools and allows you to work with data in that collaborative way across the full end-to-end spectrum. So that's what the team's loving. But what they don't like is some of the admin changes that are taking at the moment a few hours to perforate through the environment. So you do need to plan that in. And that's an important thing. That's where we come into play with Altus, is we can help you map in some of those pros and cons and ways you can work it and make sure that it works within the right operating model of your organization. Who will benefit from using Fabric? This is a very open question. Of course, it could be all sorts of people. The way that I am seeing this at the moment is there's a few different types that I think are really going to benefit from it. People in the business side who your organization's moved to Azure and have moved to a modern data platform, and maybe they, in their particular business unit, haven't necessarily been provided with the data outcomes that they were initially promised at the early stages of the platform move, with the MDP work. That doesn't mean necessarily MDP hasn't delivered. It just maybe hasn't delivered for them, particularly based on priorities and where money has been spent up to date. So those businesses, through Fabric and having the ability for the business people, smarter business people in terms of smarter with data, to be able to maybe get in there and do end-to-end, allows them to be able to reduce the time to outcome, which is such an important thing these days. I also think that heads of data who have had a lot of money allocated to their data program and maybe have spent a lot of time on doing migrations and certain core functions, but don't maybe having trouble getting additional funding on top of that or further down the stream to maybe fund some of the particular business units, this is a way of actually moving it over to the business side and allowing them to spend money and do some of their own things in certain situations. And there may be organizations who earlier on bought into this concept of self-service, released a tool like Power BI to the users to self-serve, but then found the data sets weren't there necessarily for the needs of that particular business user to then fully self-service. This allows them to more end-to-end provide the data up themselves, drag it into their data sets into the lake, then be able to quickly open up reports in the same interface to build those reports and maybe do some machine learning to actually get the outcomes themselves and really do that self-service. And then really anyone in your organization who is really smart with their analyst and their data manipulation. They really understand the data, what it means, the context around it, and it's really giving them the tools to be able to service that up. I wanted to go through the terminology. A good way of conversing and getting up to speed with Fabric is understanding the terminology. With all new tools comes a new set of terms. It's one of the tricky parts of a new solution into the market is understanding the terms so that you can converse and be able to understand that within your particular organization. With everything in the cloud, one of the key ones, of course, is capacity. Have you set enough capacity across the end-to-end journey of Fabric to get your data sets going to the right cost, to the right performance? In Fabric, the real term is experience. Each of the Fabric is that overarching tool that solution go in and they've got all the components within there. Each of those is an experience, the experience of moving between data warehousing and data engineering and data science, etc. The collection of functionality there is the experience. Within that, each capability within that experience is an item within there. And that sits with your own overarching tenant. Your overarching Azure tenant of where things are. And the core one is coming from the Power BI side of things. If you've used Power BI, one of the core aspects of Power BI is the workspace. And so that is now permutated all the way through Fabric, and that end-to-end working and that collaboration is such an important aspect of Fabric, and that's what it brings to the table for you. Specifically, domains, a data domain is really that concept of having data sets which are focused more on lines of business or business domain to allow them to put data into the lake in an area that they can use and logically group together for their consumption needs. It doesn't mean that you don't have enterprise data or gold standard data in there. It really means that you're able to have those self-service levels of data wider set available that you can then, if it's of a good enough quality and a good enough, does the need for the business and other people should action it, you can then move it across and look to put it into those more enterprise level data sets and processes. But it allows you to have data domains that are really much more tied to get the reduction in time to outcome for your business units. Of course, an important part is having control over your Fabric domains. You want to make sure you've got rights and permissions, of course. It's around making sure these things are governed, make sure starting of some aspects of the governance around it, making sure that someone comes in and doesn't accidentally delete a data domain. You make sure that you can set up your users to have the right permissions and the right type of users are set up in the right particular ways. That's one of the other reasons that you'd use an organization like Altus to come in to help you map these things out ahead of time. With a lot of these things, it's quite easy to come in and start using the tool, especially if you've gone on one of the Altus training courses for Fabric. But it's really around making sure you set up some of these things in advance so that if you do go in and start using it without these, who knows what you can create. You can create lots of mess. You can create a spaghetti situation So you want to make sure some of these things are mapped out in advance and set up. That's where we can help. Now, one of the cool things is this concept of endorsement. We used to call this really more of a gold, silver, and bronze standard, and we still do, but I love the concept of it being called endorsement. This is a new term that I have fully bought in on. Endorsement allows you to say in your back-end data sets all the way through to the reporting side, is this a set of data that we endorse to be a good quality standard to be used in certain situations or not? It allows you to certify it, promote it with that classification, so that in the dashboards and other reporting, you can actually have users see if that data is endorsed. So, for example, here in your report, there's a column for endorsements to say if this is a certified or a promoted or it's not endorsed data set, so that users they can very clearly see what that value of that data is in terms of the endorsement, so that they can feel the trust around that. That's that governance around there as well, the trust, so that they can work on it. That's one of the things that was an obstacle in self-service. We can use this data, but do we trust that data? This allows you to have a whole new level to that conversation. Of course, there's also this one lake. One lake is a concept of being able to have your data there that you can drag in all sorts of data, structured and unstructured data. You can drag in all sorts of different data sets to form that data that's going into Fabric that allows you to then consume and manipulate and work with it in whatever way you'd like to. That then ties into making sure you've got your lakehouse data and your warehouse data, and the data sets formed in folders and files in a way that makes sense. This is another reason that you need Altus to come in. We're very good at making sure you set those up in the right way with the right naming standards, with the right structures, and where should you put this type of data in what particular way, how often should you set it up, how often do you automatically reload it, etc. That is an important part of bringing us in early on so that this becomes trusted and strong and very usable on the other side through the process. You don't want this part of how you're structuring the data back there to be too messy. And so this then ties it all together of the Fabric having all of these experiences, the tools on top from end to end, tying in the compute, and then how you're structuring the data in your actual data lake and warehouse components underneath. This is what Fabric is. It really allows you to have that collaborative space that's come from that Power BI side. This is really powerful, and this is why it really ties into that self-service world where a lot of users have been using Power BI, and they want to use that same collaborative space across the end-to-end journey of data. A lot of organizations have also been considering data mesh, where you have data across different systems that you are meshed together, where you've got an overarching mesh across it to then be able to pull from. Fabric is quite a similar concept. It's actually a technical way of achieving a data mesh. So this is a wonderful way of achieving that and reducing the time to outcome as well. And users are able to drop files into the lakehouse themselves, which makes it a really easy, simple way of propagating that data sets for people to use, not one of several. In terms of an architecture, you've got to have an architecture picture in a webinar. Everyone loves an architecture. This one is a simple one, just talks about what we did, what we've just been talking about, being able to bring structured and unstructured data sets in, pulling them in, extracting them from source systems, etc., bringing those into data flows through, transforming them, and then consuming them on the other side through Power BI and machine learning, etc. One of the other things that Altus really can help you with in this space is really that concept of taking this architecture, which is obviously is quite simple illustration, and then mapping that into how this could fit within your existing platform yourselves, and how this works with your other tools, and how that works with the endorsement side of things to make sure, let's do this for these types of data sets and these types of scenarios, so we can reduce that time to outcome. But for these other scenarios where there may be more enterprise level reporting, we'll do it in a slightly different way. So that architecting approach is very important to bring us in for. Of course, Charles and our team would be tell me I was remiss if I didn't highlight that there is a cost. Microsoft don't give this away for free. There is a charge to this. And so this was some of the early indication of what that costing it could be. You'll need to sort of work with Microsoft or ourselves to help you understand exactly what that is specifically for your organization. But it would be remiss of me if I didn't highlight that price needs to be a consideration for where, when, and how you'd roll this out for your organization. Now, for us, well, for me particularly, as you probably heard earlier, a good new term and a new concept is important. I specifically have been working on the concept of a data conductor, trademark pending, as you can see. Data conductor is this concept that I think is really important when we look at Microsoft Fabric. It really is, now that we're looking to expand some of this self-service and the concept of time to outcome, when we're looking at business outcomes and we're looking at taking some of this augmented analytics and really being able to transform at the bottom the roles that people are coming through with how they're using data. A data conductor who is there mainly more in the business side to conduct business projects and business needs to data, and then using Fabric to provide that from an end-to-end picture. That data conductor is such a powerful concept of a role that needs to be played out in your organization at a business unit level. Data conductors. It doesn't mean that you don't need the same existing roles within your data team. They're still very important, but those data teams would work with a data conductor to really conduct the time to outcome reduction for your business units. They really are the people who work from the governance and support the governance down to the data platform and everything in between for each individual business unit. Now, in terms of Fabric, it is in pre-release right now. It is looking to be out into production by around November this year, round about when Microsoft Ignite happens. That is the information available to us at the moment. You never know really, but that's what it's been indicated to us on. As it is in pre-release, you can get your hands on the tools now. That's how we've put together our training that you can come to and learn and get your hands onto the tools. But you can get your hands on now yourself. But it is coming out into production release for November 2023. Now, with a lot of these tools, that doesn't mean necessarily you put everything into production in December. It means maybe that you might put it mid next year. You might be really looking to do it more in anger, which means that really now you need to understand a lot of these things and plan out how you're going to use it, how it architects into your environment, get some of your team trained in it, start to understand who your data conductors are now, so you can start planning out getting there to mid next year. So that's important to understand those timeframes. Of course, we wouldn't be data professionals without understanding where our offerings sit in this market. Azure Fabric, those end-to-end solutions that are part of it, those experiences, using that terminology, it's important these days. We underpin it with all of our data services, some of our frameworks, our advisory services, and all our delivery services, because we have also been really around delivering outcomes. That's been our focus for 25 years. And so that trying to drive outcomes, which is what Fabric's around, is really underpinned by our processes to support that. We have a lot of training, of course. You're probably well aware of our training catalog. We push that out quite often into the market. We get a lot of people doing training. What we've done is we've put a lens on it from a Fabric perspective. We have some specific Fabric training courses. But we also have looked at it from the lens of what other training do we provide, some of the governance, steward training, privacy training, Power BI training, AI training, that would give you concepts that would really support the end-to-end upskilling of your data conductors and the people who are around there to support it. So not just technical training on the tools, which we have, but that all overarching training. All of these are available to sign up to. Talk to us. We'd love to talk to you about them. Of course, it'd be remiss if I didn't highlight also our Power BI frameworks that have been built by our wonderful UK team. These really also from the Power BI side of the Fabric side really enrich some of the governance and some of the processes around some of that side as well. Now, we do have some calls to action, of course. What good webinar is there if there's not a call to action? These calls to action are for New Zealand only. In Australia, you'll need to talk to your own regional manager over there or your sales team from Altus to talk to them about how they can help you. But in particular for New Zealand, I wanted to have a few calls to action for people who came to this webinar or have seen the recording. We wanted to support people who want to do some of the training. If you sign up before a particular date, we can give you a reduction on your training costs. If you want to understand a bit more about Fabric and where it would tie in for your organization, feel it out a bit, we can do a one free day of an environment review and discussion on how that is. And then if you're a bit more advanced and say, look, we do think we're going to do this and we really want some services around mapping that out, if you sign up to a slightly larger engagement of that, we'll give you a discount on advisory services around, let's take this and map that out. What are your operating models around using this? How do we train your team up? Who are your data conductors? That sort of thing. How does the architect this into your environment? Those sort of services. Contact me after this or one of our sales team, Gokul, Margaret, whoever. Or talk to your, whichever Altus person in New Zealand that you like the most. Hopefully I'll be in the top 3. So that's it. Questions. I'll stop sharing and I'll pass over to Samantha to see if there's any questions in our call log. If you do have any questions, just put them in the Q&A section. We don't have to have questions, of course, but if you do, put them in there. Otherwise, just reach out to us afterwards. I'd love to circle back and talk to you about these, take you out for a coffee, have a conversation, have a Teams meeting. Of course, Teams meetings are always the rage these days. But yeah, thank you very much for your time and joining today. Remember, I do have a webinar in 2 weeks' time on ChatGPT. Looking forward to talking about that and how that sits and maybe a little bit of practical advice around how to map that into your roadmap over the next year or so. And that one's got some of the workings from our Chief Security Officer, Charles Tiariki, who gives some context around some of those practicalities to make sure that you are de-risking yourself or at least aware of some of those risks of using ChatGPT in your organization. As we don't have any questions, there's no questions at the moment. Thank you for attending. When you get the recording, feel free to share it and hope you have a great lunchtime. Talk to you later. Ciao.